What was awesome about St. Clare? Well, many things, but you could say that essentially she was no ordinary nun. She was a pop star of her time because the way she did things simply had never been done exactly this way before. And the story starts with 3 promises: poverty, chastity, and obedience. Clare was a teenager when Francis and a group of men began a movement to live their faith out in a radical new way. This became the Franciscan way. They lived as beggars, cared for lepers, and roamed from town to town preaching and performing in the streets. When Clare first heard Francis of Assisi speak, she thought he was the best thing since sliced bread, and asked him if she could live her life in exactly the same way as him. Honestly, most men at that time would have said, "No way, Jose. This life is no way for a woman to live." At that time, women were considered psychologically and physically weaker than men. But something about Clare opened Francis' heart, and he agreed. And so began a friendship that changed the world, and that seemed to take Francis himself his lifetime to come to terms with. Slowly, she became his equal in everything, starting with poverty. Which brings us to chastity. Clare didn't want to get married to some guy chosen by her parents and spend her life having babies. At the age of 17, she gave up the wealth that she'd grown up with as an aristocrat and ran away from home and met with Francis and his friends outside of her hometown. In time, she led her own community of women who, to the world's surprise, supported themselves by manual labour and refused to live on endowments or their inheritance. She exchanged the love of a husband with the joy of belonging to no one but God. Which brings us to obedience with a twist. Obedience is about putting the needs of a community ahead of your own. And Clare did this, but in doing so, her individuality grew and shone all the more. Communities like the Poor Clares had a rule, kind of like a constitution, which was always written by men for women. On her deathbed, the Pope visited Clare and asked her if he could get her anything. She famously pulled her own rule, which she had handwritten from her sleeve, pointed to it and said, "Your signature." When we consider the courage it would have taken to reject every form of social stability available to her, we can admire Clare. But when we glimpse the friendship she risked with Francis in order to realise her calling, we begin to feel her heartbeat, taste her sacrifice, and we begin to love her.